Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we've got a special comment from Billboard BREAKDOWN. So if you watched the episode of Billboard BREAKDOWN that came out last night, the episode for the Hot 100 week of December 20th, 2014, you might have noticed a curious omission from my list. A song that leapt up 20 slots this week. A pop-flavored country song from a relative unknown that's her first major hit outside of the reality show that initially put her in the spotlight. A song that has earned some praise, but also some considerable controversy, especially given the current country music scene right now, and especially the duo that's now topping the country charts. Yep, some of you knew this was coming, some of you have asked for me to talk specifically about this song. And now, it's time to talk about Ray Lynn's God Made Girls. Now first, some necessary context surrounding the circumstances that spawned both this song and some of the controversy around it. And the best place to start would be with the artist herself. Ray Lynn, yes, it's all one word, originally came into the spotlight when she auditioned for season 2 of The Voice and made it on, which I can't seem to get away from this week. She chose Blake Shelton's team over Adam Levine and made it to the quarterfinals, where she was there eliminated. And yet, in a strange way, she's actually proven to be more successful than the winner that year, Jermaine Paul, who was also on Blake Shelton's team, and I haven't heard anything from him. And yet it seems like Blake Shelton is giving Ray Lynn a surprising amount of publicity, featuring her on 2 of his recent albums, and backing vocals on the absolutely terrible song Boys Round Here last year, and a duet with him titled Buzzin' from his most recent album Bringing Back the Sunshine, where her talents were also completely wasted. Now the one thing that both these tracks have in common is that both of them have sucked, but not precisely because of her, which is telling. And we also need to consider the country music climate right now. Bro country hasn't exactly had a good year, with several artists losing a lot of steam and a lot of terrible songs rising to the top simply on momentum alone. The genre seems to be in a state of real flux, especially for its female artists. I mean, sure, you've got established hitmakers like Carrie Underwood and Miranda Lambert, but beyond that, most women in country have either earned their success behind the scenes or independently. And sure, Brandy Clark is finally starting to get recognized for her stellar album 12 Stories and some of her songwriting, and sure, Casey Musgraves is justly cleaning up on the award show circuit, but it's not like she's getting any real airplay. Granted, that might also have to deal with the socio-political climate of country music, her particular brand of music, and the fact that she's not one to compromise or deal well with stupid. Looking at you, Bobby Bones. And with Taylor Swift gone to pop, Lady Antebellum struggling to maintain any sort of relevance, and the band Perry between albums right now, there's a real gap in country music and promoting female artists to teenagers, especially teenage girls. Now all this leads to God Made Girls, a song written by Ray Lynn and a few co-writers, all of them women, and is now starting to climb country and mainstream radio, currently at number 61 on the Hot 100 and number 1 on the country digital charts. This is past novelty curiosity on the charts. This song is becoming a hit, and it sucks a lot. And you know, I'm not even talking about the lyrics yet or the video. I'm talking about the music. I like producer Joey Moy and his ability to lend some broad texture to his songs, but it's very clear he's much better working with Flora Georgia Line and Jake Owen than with Ray Lynn, whose voice is too thin to be set against these thicker guitars and this brand of rollicking production all at the very front of the mix. It drowns her out. For a song all about emphasizing the delicate and girlish, the instrumentation doesn't really fit that, and the muddier production doesn't exactly help. And I'll be blunt, and I know this is gonna look harsh, but I don't think Ray Lynn's voice is quite ready for primetime yet. Yeah, I get the thicker Texan accent is a feature to her delivery, but her tone isn't exactly very clean on this song, and with every slurred word, she comes across as desperately needing a lot of polish. And keep in mind, she's signed to an extension of Big Machine, and label executive Scott Borchetta, he's not an idiot. He would have recognized that Ray Lynn probably could have used a little bit of seasoning and training in the minor leagues before charting in the mainstream. So you immediately have to start wondering why exactly he and his label are pushing this song. Now, keep that question at the back of your mind, because we now need to talk about the real issues that many people are talking about with God Made Girls. The lyrics. Now, regardless of the content, I'd have issues with the lyrics anyway, because I tend to prefer my teen girl music to be on the brattier side, like say from Avril Lavigne or Kesha. And Ray Lynn is decidedly embracing the fluttery pink princess and pony side of the spectrum. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. It's a side of femininity that some women like and appreciate, and it's not anti-feminist for Ray Lynn to embrace it in a song that she helped write. great. While I'm not exactly a fan of the aesthetic, I'm a fan more of women in country who spit a little bit more fire and brimstone. The lyrical style is not the problem, it's the content. The premise of the song is that in order to keep guys in line and rock guys' world, God made girls. In other words, it places women as existing in order to complement men, not as their own autonomous interest. And guys are expected to wash their trucks and go to church because God made girls for them. And it places the girls in very much of a stereotypical feminine role. Now, as I said, the aesthetic is not the problem. Hell, I'd argue the traditional gender role isn't exactly the problem either, because from the tone of the song, the girls seem to be perfectly fine with it. The issue here comes in that there is a higher power that specifically created half of the human race to complement the other, defining the role and saying implicitly, if you don't want to fit in that role, you're going against God. Now, a lot of people have criticized this song as being kind of sexist, and on a certain level, I definitely agree. However, there's a lot of other facets to this conversation and this song that need to be considered. For one, this song was written and performed by women, which makes this a little bit more complicated, because let's be honest here, if this song was written or sung by, let's say, Justin Moore or Blake Shelton, he'd be getting a lot more hatred than it's already received. But this is a case of Raylan herself writing and saying these things, speaking from her heart to her beliefs surrounding gender roles and God. If she's defining what she wants and believes for herself, it'd be hard for me as a man to argue that that's anti-feminist, because that's her choice. Now granted, her scope is considerably larger as she's speaking about all girls, which should come across as extremely presumptuous, and that leads to my second point. She's talking about girls. Both from her delivery to her lyrical style, she's presenting a very young, very girlish point of view. There's inexperience here, perhaps naivete, a very adolescent and shallow viewpoint of the world, and thus it's hard for me to take this any sort of seriously as intentionally sexist. If she's playing this with a much older perspective, it'd be a lot more objectionable, but as it is, I can look at this song and think, well, okay, she thinks this now, but give her 2 years and a bad breakup and we'll see where she's really at. But you know what? There's even more to this song than that, and we now need to talk about the God part of this song and where we get into really tricky territory. Keep in mind that Raylan grew up in Texas going to church, and it's fair to assume that her religious beliefs colored her songwriting on this track. And if we're going for a very literal interpretation of Genesis, her song does kind of coincide with the story of why God created Eve from Adam. Granted, there are certain books in the Bible that should be read metaphorically, and Genesis is one of those books, Revelation being another, but it explains why Raylan wrote a song like this. It's not justifying it or excusing it, but it explains where these beliefs come from, for better or for worse. Hell, with the attempted effervescent tone and complete lack of drama on the song, you could argue this track is borderline Christian music, which if anything makes things a little bit worse. I've talked about it before in my Hosier review, why I don't tend to cover religious music, and this song is a prime example why, because it's taking a very solid chunk of its socially conservative, likely very religious audience and telling them exactly what they want to hear. And I gotta be honest, that doesn't make for interesting or dramatic music or anything that's all that good. But you know what? God Made Girls isn't marketed as Christian music. And herein lies the real ugliness of this conversation. And this circles back to the question of why Scott Borchetta would want to push Raylan in this song. Well, it all comes back to marketing. And in this case, the duo that is currently sitting atop the country charts right now.
Being a girl in a country song, how in the world did it go so wrong? Like all we're good for is looking good for you and your friends on the weekend, nothing more.
Yep, we're gonna talk about Maddie and Tay. Let me start by saying that while I kind of admire Girl in a Country Song for its construction, it's pretty see-through for what it is. Basically, it's a broad reinterpretation of bro country cliches in order to market an anti-bro country message. There are points where it can be kind of clever thanks to the writing, and my disturbingly extensive knowledge of bro country, I tell what they're making reference to, but as it is, you can tell Scott Borchetta is he's trying to play both sides here. He's got bro country, he's got anti-bro country, and he's making a fortune by playing up the competition. But Maddie and Tay's approach is very confrontational, and Borchetta knows that if he wants to push more women towards country, particularly young women, he knows he's gotta play more angles here to bring in teenage girls who aren't exactly lining up to take that more confrontational side. Hence, we've got God Made Girls, a song that seems perfectly poised to capitalize on that market and cover the full demographic. Now, the interesting thing is that Scott Borchetta used to have an artist who could potentially fill both roles, and her name was Taylor Swift, an artist who could get confrontational and aggressive, but also made more than her fair share of songs with fairy tales and girlish iconography. Today Was a Fairy Tale, love story. It's one of the reasons why Taylor Swift had such massive demographic appeal and was so much popular with his female fan base, and why Scott Borchetta has been panicking to replace her now that she's gone full pop. Now, some of you have probably picked up on the fact that even with Ray Lynn and Maddie and Tay, we don't exactly have a full spectrum of young female viewpoints in country music, and it'd be hard to classify any of them as really feminist rather than just being reactionary. So why isn't that market angle being pushed? Well, speaking as a feminist and a longtime fan of country music, it doesn't exactly surprise me that Scott Borchetta is completely ignoring a progressive viewpoint, half because country music is primarily marketed to a more conservative audiences that aren't interested in that viewpoint, and half because, well, the more feminist-leaning country music artists, they aren't getting airplay. It's not like they don't exist. I do feel that some, and I use this term very loosely, Tumblr activists are jumping on the bandwagon to flame God Made Girls, but have nothing with which to really replace him. And that really pisses me off, because when I can name a half dozen female country acts with a progressive angle who would kill on the radio, and yet are completely ignored outside of, well, critics and their very small fan bases, I get angry about this. And in a sense, it's the public's fault here. If you want to hate God Made Girls and aren't looking to push in, say, Casey Musgraves, Lydia Lovelace, Brandy Clark, Lucette, Karen Jonas, Ashley Monroe, Caitlin Rose, I could easily go on here. If you don't have that replacement in mind and you're just pushing for the change, it's not going to get any better. Hell, I've been cheering for Lucy Hale all damn year, who has basically all of Taylor Swift's appeal and a built-in audience coming off of Pretty Little Liars, plus far better songwriting, and yet her biggest hit peaked at number 88. You know what? Sometimes the audience is getting exactly what they deserve. So you know what? Okay, let's take this back to God Made Girls. Does the song suck? Well, yeah, definitely. I'm not defending this song, but I'm explaining why it exists and why there's an audience for it. But I can't hate this song either because I don't get any sense of malice or bad intentions behind it. It's too amateurish, sloppy, and earnest to feel like a cynical cash-in, but rather a girl who doesn't know any better writing a clumsy song reinforced by the religious belief she's probably had her entire life. The only ill will behind God Made Girls is in its marketing, where you should really get angry. And the only way to beat that is just ignoring God Made Girls until it goes away. You know, like with what the mainstream public does with pretty much all Christian music, which is where God Made Girls probably belongs and will probably end up. Until that happens, I've only got one question left for you all. Why are all these girls blondes?